All right, so let's talk about some general ethics concerns. So the history is, as we know, has been plagued with this bias and harmful content, but also coders, and the worry that that would just accelerate or expand the proliferation of that biased content. So the worry there being that it replicates or amplifies some of our existing flaws. I don't want to overlook the environmental costs on water and energy and increased rates of pollution, etc. So I mean we can't overscore that. I don't know that anybody is stopping because of it. So I think we're going to have to just make that into our own ethical decision making process. Transparency of the training model data I think is really important. If we don't know what went into it, we don't know what's influencing it coming out. You can kind of think about it as thinking, if I'm working with a client, I want to know their developmental history that kind of led them to that moment. Much like a large language model or an image model, I want to know its developmental history of how it came to that moment that I'm interacting with it. The idea about compensating creators for the content that was used to train the model is currently being litigated at the time of this recording. So we're not really sure. I know that some publishers have entered into agreements with AI companies to compensate creators for the material, but that's going to continue to evolve. When we think about the idea that there is someone, a programmer, a team, etc., adjusting the guardrails and the levers at all times, there becomes questions about who can access or who can adjust those. What's the perspective of the person adjusting those levers? Should the user have that responsibility and that power? Privacy and use of data is probably paramount in all technology, and I think it's just amplified here with AI. What happens to what I put into the user interface? What happens to my interactions with the generative AI model? And I think that one of the concerns has come about overuse and trust in the generative data. We use it um, because it sounds so confident and it sounds so good, we assume that it must be. Um, I don't know that this is any different than over trusting web resources without fully vetting and evaluating the veracity of those sources. So I think the same paradigms that we had of evaluating sources of information in the pre-generative AI internet era, I think will apply here. The way we go about verifying sources will just be a little different. Ironically, the thing that freaks me out the most are deep fakes. There's been a lot of stories about fake nude photo generators that have really, I think, had a negative impact on a lot of young people's lives. But also kind of the worry about will those be used in political ways. I think the rate of growth and pacing of advancements has been much quicker than anyone would have anticipated. And if that growth curve just continues, I think that, yeah, who knows where we'll be in the next year. We mentioned, I think another one is that impact on critical thinking or creativity is will we just kind of give that part of our brain over to the machine or not? And will I know that most people would say it's an additive process, but I don't know. We don't know what the next decade will show us and how this will either enhance our ability to critically reflect and generate content, or whether or not we will just rely on it and call it good enough content. And then every time I hear an AI person talk about the future, they tend to ask each other, what's your P-doom? And the P-doom is what's the probability that doom will occur with this advancement or that advancement, or maybe just in general. So if you hear people talking about P-doom, that is the probability that they believe doom will occur. Maybe there's a P-hope somewhere. What's the probability of hope happening? I don't know, but I definitely hear people talking about P-doom far more often. And as we think about more clinical applications, informed consent always should include information about what technology you are or aren't using. And I think artificial intelligence is no different. If you're using any technology, even if it's embedded into your EHR system, your electronic medical record system, you probably want to disclose that. I think one of the emerging concerns that's happened with companion bots is that the realness of the encounter is much higher than anticipated. So much so that it does seem whether the person was susceptible or had something, under the surface beforehand, I'm not here to debate that. But the realness does seem to be very convincing and could then lead people to do things that they might not otherwise do if they were interacting in with some other technology. Along the same lines, I think we're going to see a new form of attachment happening to. I mean, it's already happening to social media, but I think this is going to be a new type of attachment that will soon become pathologized, and that will soon, stake its claim in the DSM if that continues to exist. One of my bigger concerns at the time of this recording is there's no mandated reporting requirements, much like I know what would happen if me as a clinician overlooked something or failed to report a threat of harm to self or other. But companion bots, chat bots, as best they can do is direct people to resources right now. But even some of them do not do that. So there's no standards for the response that a company should have to some of that content. So I think a reasonable regulation would be to do those things, have some mandated reporting requirements, and have some standard responses to self and other harm risks or threats. And then finally, I've even heard stories of some of the companion bot technology um, misrepresenting themselves as qualified mental health practitioners. So for me, if a company cannot guarantee that its bot will not misrepresent itself, I don't believe it should be able to function. I don't think it should be able to operate. So again, I think this is important from a couple of different lenses because it's not just about our ethical decision and our use of AI. It's also about the ethical decision making and the use of AI that are the people we serve have. So I think it's important, much like we would do in any intake session, to evaluate different risks of behavioral addiction or overuse or something like that. We do that with technology anyway now, I hope. So AI is just going to be another flavor of that kind of technological assessment. So disruption is going to happen, whether it's to the marketplace, to our industry, to our personal lives. And that's scary. And I don't want to overlook that. And I don't want to understate that either. And I really think that it's up to us and really how we respond to that disruption is going to be what matters. If it does take away a segment of the workforce, what do we do instead? How do we support those people who are displaced? How do we provide resources around that? How do we upskill, reskill, provide safety nets, etc.? Um, how are we going to respond to that disruption? I think that's really going to determine, is it a net positive or a net negative?